The tires hit the Chicago tarmac when the notification lit up my screen. An email from my mother, Victoria. She had canceled my executive suite reservation for the Global Tech Summit. She didn't just cancel it. She transferred my founder privileges to upgrade my sister Chloe and her lazy fiancé Marcus to the presidential suite. My own mother stole my room to bankroll their luxury vacation. I didn't blink. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't cry. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. For years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family, funding their lives with my sanity. Now I realized it had been a subscription, with me footing the bill, and it was time to cancel. I opened my laptop right there in seat 4A. I extracted the complete server logs of the fraudulent room transfer. I didn't call my mother to beg. I bypassed the front desk entirely and contacted my corporate account manager at American Express. Within 90 seconds, I flagged the presidential suite authorization as fraudulent and permanently froze the card on file. Without a valid payment method, the hotel's automated system instantly locked the suite. This wasn't revenge. It was basic accounting. As I walked off the plane, I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, but there was only razor-sharp clarity. My family had spent years perfecting the trap of ruthless normalization. They'd conditioned me to believe that my role was to produce, and their role was to consume. I was the one pulling all-nighters, coding national-level artificial intelligence architecture, while my mother used my rising prestige to secure massive contracts for her legacy tech firm. I was the one eating instant ramen in a cramped laboratory while Chloe posted photos from yachts my algorithms paid for. They expected me to simply accept this theft today because that was the invisible chain of the survivor. They thought I was still trapped in that psychological prison without bars, paralyzed by learned helplessness, conditioned to swallow the abuse to keep the peace. They thought I would quietly book a cheap motel down the street and let them parade around the summit using my credentials. But the chain was already broken. The ledger was unbalanced, and I was about to audit the last decade of my life. I walked through the busy terminal with a steady, rhythmic pace. I was 30 years old, and I was holding the keys to an artificial intelligence project worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They had severely underestimated the kind of security protocols a master systems architect puts on her own life. Every keystroke I made was another steel door locking them out of my kingdom. My mother thought she could manipulate the board by humiliating me at the one summit that mattered most. She thought taking my room would destabilize me. Instead, it just gave me the absolute, unemotional focus I needed to execute a complete corporate and familial liquidation. The transaction of our bloodline was officially terminated. I navigated the bustling airport corridors, surrounded by thousands of travelers, yet I had never felt more singular in my purpose. The emotional baggage I had carried since childhood was left behind on that aircraft. I calculated the exact trajectory of their impending downfall with the same rigorous logic I applied to my machine learning models. There was no room for error, no space for sentimentality. I had spent my entire existence optimizing systems for maximum efficiency. Now, it was finally time to optimize my own reality and permanently delete the viruses from my network. I found them at baggage claim carousel number 6. Chloe and Marcus were standing there surrounded by 4 massive designer suitcases. Hanging prominently around their necks were VIP conference badges that granted them access to closed-door investor meetings, despite the fact that neither of them could define what a neural network was if their lives depended on it. I walked right up to them. Chloe spotted me first, her lips curving into a perfectly rehearsed, condescending smirk. She looked me up and down, taking in my simple blazer and travel-worn appearance. She leaned against Marcus, crossing her arms. "Well, look who decided to show up," Chloe sneered. "Mom told us you were probably going to throw a fit and fly back home since you don't have a place to stay." Marcus chuckled, a lazy, grating sound. He adjusted his stolen VIP badge and looked at me like I was an employee who had just missed a critical deadline. "You really need to learn to be a team player, Aria." Victoria said if you just accept the new terms of the project distribution, she might let you sleep on the couch in our suite. They were demanding I hand over the controlling shares of my own artificial intelligence algorithm just to get a scrap of floor space in a room I had paid for. They weren't shocked by what they'd done. They were shocked that I wasn't panicking. I looked at Marcus, taking in his smug posture. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just checked my watch. It was exactly 2:15 in the afternoon. Right on schedule, Chloe's phone began to ring loudly. It was the private concierge line for the hotel's presidential wing. She answered it with a self-important sigh, clearly expecting to be asked what kind of champagne she wanted waiting in the room. "Yes, this is Chloe Nguyen," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I watched the blood drain from her face in real time. Her perfect posture crumbled. "What do you mean the suite is frozen?" she demanded, her voice shrill and echoing across the crowded baggage claim area. "No, you cannot cancel the reservation. My mother, Victoria Nguyen, authorized the transfer." She listened for another 10 seconds, her eyes darting toward me with sudden, unmasked panic. "Forged signatures? Fraud investigation? What are you talking about? We are VIP guests." Marcus grabbed her arm, looking alarmed. "What is going on?" he asked. Chloe ignored him, gripping her phone so hard her knuckles turned white. "We are on our way there right now. You better have this fixed before we arrive, or my mother will have your job." She ended the call and glared at me, her chest heaving. "What did you do?" she hissed. I adjusted the strap of my laptop bag, my expression completely flat. "I just balanced the spreadsheet," I said smoothly. "You should probably hurry to the hotel. I hear the grand lobby gets very crowded when you have nowhere to sleep." I turned and walked toward the exit, leaving them stranded next to their mountain of luggage, entirely out of options and out of time. The Global Tech Summit was held in a massive, glass-walled convention center overlooking the Chicago skyline. It was a sea of venture capitalists, software billionaires, and industry titans. At the center of it all was my mother, Victoria. She had somehow secured a spot as an honorary speaker on a panel about technology ethics. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. I stood near the back of the grand seminar hall, blending into the shadows as the panel concluded. Victoria stepped off the stage, immediately surrounded by a flock of eager investors. Marcus and Chloe were hovering right behind her. They had managed to charm their way into the building, probably using Victoria's credentials to bypass the security freeze at the hotel. As soon as Victoria spotted me, her eyes narrowed into predatory slits. She whispered something to Marcus and Chloe, and the three of them moved toward the center of the exhibition floor. They waited until a group of high-profile national defense investors walked past. Then, Victoria launched her attack. "Aria!" she called out, her voice unnaturally loud, designed to carry across the acoustic space. Everyone turned to look. Victoria's face was arranged in a mask of deep, maternal concern. "I am so glad you finally showed up. We have been incredibly worried about your mental state." I stopped walking. The investors paused, their interest piqued by the sudden drama. Marcus stepped forward, holding a thick manila folder. "We just want to help you, Aria," he said, playing the role of the concerned future brother-in-law. "You have been working too hard. The pressure of the National Artificial Intelligence Project has clearly fractured your stability. You are making erratic decisions, like locking your own family out of our accommodations." Victoria placed a hand on her chest, looking around at the silent crowd. "My daughter is a brilliant coder, but she lacks the psychological fortitude to manage a project of this magnitude. She is becoming paranoid. She is accusing us of theft. I am stepping in as her legal and professional proxy to ensure the national project is not compromised by her deteriorating mental health." It was a flawlessly executed public execution. They were using the oldest trick in the corporate playbook, labeling the female founder as hysterical and unstable to justify a hostile takeover. They wanted to humiliate me in front of the exact people who were holding the keys to my funding. They wanted to paint me as a massive liability so Victoria could swoop in as the responsible, steady hand. Chloe pulled out a tissue, dabbing at dry eyes. "We just want you to get help, Aria. Give Mom the project rights so you can rest." The whispers started immediately. I could see the investors exchanging doubtful glances. mental calculators tallying up the risk of keeping their money tied to someone being publicly declared unfit by her own family. My mother smiled at me, a tiny, triumphant curve of her lips. She thought she had won. She thought the public pressure would crush me into submission. I looked at the three of them, standing shoulder to shoulder in their expensive clothes, ready to strip mine my life's work. I didn't defend myself. I just walked straight toward the main audiovisual control podium at the front of the hall. I stepped up to the main podium. The audio technician tried to stop me, but I flashed my executive access badge, and he backed away. I plugged my encrypted drive directly into the master console. Marcus marched down the center aisle, holding up his manila folder like a weapon. "These are the internal documents," he announced loudly to the room. "Signed and authorized transfers, giving Victoria Wynne full intellectual property rights to the artificial intelligence algorithm. Aria signed them herself 3 days ago before her episode began." I tapped the microphone. The screech of feedback silenced the entire hall. "I didn't sign anything," I said, my voice echoing off the glass walls, cold and devoid of emotion. "But I am so glad you brought up authorization, Marcus, because I have something to share with the board." I pressed enter. The massive screens flanking the stage flickered to life. The audio feed piped through the state-of-the-art surround sound system. It was a recording from the night before the summit, intercepted from a supposedly secure conference call on our company's internal network. My mother's voice filled the room, crisp and undeniable. "Just forge the signature, Marcus." "Aria never reads the physical copies anyway." Marcus's voice echoed back, sounding whiny and hesitant. "What if she checks the timestamps? If she catches me forging the copyright transfer, that is a federal crime, Victoria." Then came my mother's laugh, cruel and dismissive. "She will not do anything. She is weak. She relies on us for the corporate infrastructure. We lock her out of the hotel, push her into a public meltdown at the summit, and declare her unfit. I will take over the board seat, and you and Chloe will get your 20% cut. Just sign the damn papers, Marcus." The recording stopped. The silence in the convention center was absolute, heavy, and lethal. I looked at my mother. The color had drained from her face so completely she looked like a ghost. Chloe was frozen, her mouth hanging open. But it was Marcus who broke first. He dropped the manila folder, the fake documents scattering across the carpet. He didn't shout a theatrical confession. Instead, pure survival instinct took over. He backed away from Victoria, his hands raised in frantic surrender. "I am not going down for this, Victoria," he stammered, his voice raw with panic, before turning and shoving his way through the stunned crowd toward the exit. The family alliance disintegrated in less than 30 seconds. At the back of the room, the summit's board of control, flanked by 2 corporate security officers, began walking briskly down the aisle. I leaned into the microphone, my voice chasing him as he fled. "You have just confessed to corporate fraud and forgery on an open microphone." "Marcus," I said, my tone clinical. My mother tried to step toward the podium, her hands raised in a desperate, placating gesture. "Aria, sweetheart, this is a misunderstanding. This is out of context. We can talk about this privately. You do not have a daughter anymore, Victoria," I said, staring her down. "You have a massive legal liability, and you are standing in a room full of people who just realized your entire tech ethics platform is built on felony fraud." I unplugged my drive, stepped down from the podium, and walked away. The institutional retaliation was immediate and merciless. By the time the clock struck 4 in the afternoon, the landscape of my life had begun to permanently shift. I sat in a private, glass-walled boardroom provided by the summit organizers, setting the final dominoes into motion. Victoria was escorted out of the building by security. By the following morning, the ethics committee permanently revoked her speaking credentials. But that was just the beginning. The billionaire investors who had witnessed her attempted coup didn't just walk away. They actively blacklisted her. Over the next 48 hours, 3 of her legacy firm's most crucial federal contracts were frozen, pending a criminal investigation into her fraudulent practices. The venture capital board formally requested a comprehensive third-party forensic audit of her corporation's financial reports spanning the last 8 years. Her empire was bleeding out, suffocated by the very public exposure of her corruption. Chloe's carefully curated facade collapsed just as quickly. The lifestyle brands she relied on for her influencer income severed ties the moment the scandal hit the industry channels. She couldn't afford the maintenance on her artificial life anymore. Marcus, terrified of the impending federal charges for forgery, turned on the family completely. He packed his bags, abandoned Chloe at the airport, and officially broke off the engagement in a desperate bid to distance himself from Victoria's sinking ship. He was cooperating with the authorities, trading his loyalty for a plea deal. They had tried to bury me, but they had only succeeded in digging their own graves. As the dust settled, the summit's primary venture capital coalition requested an emergency meeting with me. They had seen the unshakable, ice-cold precision with which I handled a hostile takeover attempt. They didn't see an unstable liability. They saw a ruthless, competent founder who protected her assets at all costs. I walked out of that boardroom with a finalized contract. I secured a massive Series A funding round with exceptionally favorable terms. I retained controlling interest, protected my intellectual property, and completely eliminated Victoria from the cap table. I didn't need Victoria's corporate infrastructure anymore. I had my own. I had the capital to hire my own legal team, my own developers, and my own security personnel. I had amputated the diseased limbs of my family tree, and the resulting freedom was intoxicating. There was no sadness, no lingering grief over the mother and sister I had lost. You cannot mourn people who only ever viewed you as a resource to be mined. They had spent my entire life teaching me that loyalty was a transaction, and today, their account was officially bankrupt. I stood by the massive window of the boardroom, looking out over the sprawling city of Chicago. The sky was turning a brilliant shade of bruised purple as the sun set over the distant lake. I had walked into this city as a captive to my bloodline, expected to surrender my life's work for the privilege of their fake affection. I was walking out as the sole architect of my own destiny. The audit was complete. The ledger was absolutely clear. I had secured my future, protected my intellectual property, and permanently severed the parasitic attachments that had drained my energy for nearly 3 decades. The war was over, and I had emerged entirely victorious. I packed my laptop into my bag, adjusted my blazer, and exited the room without looking back. I stand by the floor-to-ceiling window of my new corner office, looking down at the endless, pulsing streams of traffic moving through the city. The glass is cold against my fingertips, but the space behind me is warm, buzzing with the quiet hum of servers and the low, steady voices of an engineering team that works exclusively for me. No one dictates my schedule. No one steals my credit. The glass cage my family built around me has been shattered, swept away, and replaced with a fortress of my own making. Letting go of your bloodline goes against everything society conditions us to believe. We are told that family is a permanent contract, a debt we owe simply because we share a specific sequence of DNA. But I realize that sometimes walking away from the people who share your blood is the only way to find your true self. You cannot heal in the exact same environment that broke you, and you cannot grow while tied to people who only view your existence as fuel for their own massive egos. Leaving them wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of profound self-preservation. I used to think I needed their validation to prove my worth. I thought if I just worked harder, coded better algorithms, generated more wealth, they would finally love me as a daughter and a sister, rather than a utility. But the truth is, toxic people don't suddenly develop empathy just because you bleed for them. They just ask for more blood. Cutting those ties was the most brutal, brilliant accounting correction of my entire life. My mother is currently drowning in legal fees, fighting a federal fraud case she cannot win. Chloe is working a mid-level retail job, her luxury lifestyle completely evaporated. Marcus is awaiting his final sentencing. I do not check up on them. I do not feel a lingering need to see them suffer. Their ruin is simply the natural consequence of their own terrible mathematics. I've come to realize that holding on to anger is just another way of letting them live in your head rent-free. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes it's the absolute final eviction notice that sets you completely free. I don't forgive them because they deserve it. I forgive them because I no longer require their existence to define my own. I am whole, independent, and finally at peace. It has been months since the summit, and my platform is now launching globally. The algorithms I fought so fiercely to protect are revolutionizing the way we interact with machine learning. Every success I achieve is a testament to the power of walking away. The silence where their constant demands used to be is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. I built this empire with my own two hands, and I will never let anyone claim ownership over my brilliance again. Have you ever felt like you had to walk away from a toxic environment to find your true voice? Drop a comment below, and let's keep this conversation going. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories on truth and resilience.